This isn't a long story, but here goes. So my boyfriend and I were visiting a few friends in Richmond, Virginia. We went with another couple, and decided to get an Airbnb. The other couple that we went with picked out the Airbnb, but they hadn't really been to RVA before. So the place they picked was about 15 to 20 minutes outside of the city center, but not a big deal. The neighborhood was nice. The house was okay. When we got into the house, it seemed I can't really describe it. It was nice enough, and the owner left us some banana bread, but there was just this odd vibe to it. A bit of a creepy vibe. For example, when I put our stuff in our bedroom, I opened up the closet, and there was nothing in it but a chair. Not like a fold-up chair, but like a small, child's chair, facing the bed from the closet. No hangers, no other linens, no towels. Just this small chair in an empty closet. I know that reading it, it doesn't sound creepy, but I promise you, it was weird. I brushed it off, and we decided to settle in, and then go and meet up with some friends in the city. Day turned into night, we all had a bit to drink, and decided to call it an evening at around 1:30 a.m. The four of us head back to the house and went to bed. Usually, when I drink, there is nothing in the world that will wake me up. My head hits the pillow, and that is where I will remain until the sun comes up. So I don't know why it didn't happen this particular night. Maybe it was the feel of the house, but I woke up at around 3 a.m. to a quiet giggle. Like a grown man giggle. I thought maybe my boyfriend was just giggling in his sleep. But then the giggling started getting louder. And it sounded like it was coming from outside our window. The window was located behind the bed, and above our heads. So I quietly snuck up to see if I could see anything. Nothing. There was no one out there. But it went quiet. The giggling had stopped. So I was about to just go back to sleep. But then it started back up again. This time, I knew it wasn't my boyfriend. And I knew it wasn't the other couple. The giggling grew louder and louder, until it was just full-blown hysterical laughter. Right outside our window. At 3 a.m. I felt my boyfriend's hand clench mine. I didn't even know he was awake. I asked him, "Did you bring your gun?" "No. But I have my knife." He asked if I saw anything out there, and I said no. The laughing stopped after about 15 minutes. We stayed up till about 4 a.m., looking outside the window, making sure that laughter didn't come back. We finally went back to sleep. When we woke up the next morning, we asked the couple if they heard anything, and they said no. In fact, they thought we were crazy. One of them suggested that I dreamt it. But how did my boyfriend and I both dream that there was some random person laughing their heads off outside of our bedroom window? I can't tell what's creepier, to be honest. The fact that we heard that at 3 a.m. in this creepy house right next to our window, or that when I looked outside there was nothing there. I guess you can chalk up my not being able to see it to maybe this person being directly under our window. But why would someone do that? Why would someone just stay for 15 minutes outside of a house, giggling and laughing, and then just, presumably, leave? Nothing happened after that. We went back home, but to this day, my boyfriend and I still bring it up as one of the creepiest things to ever happen to us. So, to the random dude laughing outside the bedroom window at 3 a.m., let's never meet. I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in northeast Georgia. It's a beautiful area with hundreds of miles of national forests, some great state parks, and a ton of fantastic camping places. Unfortunately, my hometown is also relatively poor. While there are some out-of-town residents from Atlanta and other places, a lot of people where I live are really poor. I do freelance work as a technical writer, so I can do most of my work online. If I didn't have that going for me, I'd have to move somewhere else. It's just one of those small towns that will rob you of your ability to accomplish anything in life if you stay there too long. Excluding a handful of doctors and lawyers and Georgia Power Company employees, the only employment in the area is at Walmart, fast food, and a couple of grocery stores. To the east of my town, there's a massive national forest. It's loaded with great camping sites and lots of relatively unused hiking trails. I really enjoy hiking on them with my dog, but it can be a bit of an unnerving experience sometimes. It's about a 10-mile drive from town, and there's no cell phone service or homes for miles in the past. There have been a lot of vehicle break-ins at the trailheads. The gravel parking lots at some of them glitter with bits of broken glass from what I'm guessing were car windows. Sometimes, there are really shifty people hanging around these trailheads or just driving around on the Forest Service roads. These are really rough roads, and you'll see these beat-up $500 cars just barreling along roads meant for a 4x4. Some of the people you see in the cars look like the guy that got crushed by an ATM in Breaking Bad. All that being said, it's still a great place to camp. However, you just have to be careful. A few years ago, 2 of my friends and I decided to go play paintball in the National Forest. We decided to turn the paintball expedition into a camping trip so we could play the next morning too. After a pretty uneventful day of shooting paintballs at each other, we drive a couple of miles to one of the more popular camping spots. Unfortunately, a church group or something had taken up all the spots in the area. This was really the only camping spot that we were familiar with, and it was getting pretty late. We decide to keep on looking, so we drive for about an hour further and further into the woods. By this time, it's getting a bit dark, and we're getting a bit worried about finding a spot. We all had GPS on our smartphones, but none of us had any service. We turn off onto an unfamiliar road that isn't in very good shape. In fact, it looks like the Forest Service rangers used a backhoe to block off the road with a mound of dirt. A broken metal barrier lay in the woods nearby. That said, it looked like 4x4 vehicles had been going over the mound, so it was pretty worn down. Our F-150 had pretty high clearance, so we decided to go over the mound. There was an old gravel road on the other side, and the road was pretty much clear of debris. We drove a few miles down this road, and came across an opening next to a small creek. There were some blue tarps hanging over a plywood table nailed to a tree, which seemed kind of odd. That said, it was pretty much dark at this point, and we didn't want to keep driving around all night looking for a camping spot. We left the truck light running, and we set up the tent. As we were setting up the tent, I started to notice that there was a lot of trash in the woods surrounding the site. I see a green bottle laying on the ground. I take a look at the label, and see that it's a bottle of home and garden insecticide. I was really tired at the time, and I just thought that someone had been dumping their home garbage out here. None of us thought it was weird that someone would be dumping garbage in an area that is more than an hour from the nearest home. We set up camp, had some beers, and made chili from scratch. By this time, it was probably around 11 p.m. As we're eating, we notice a faint glow from the other side of a nearby hill. At first, we thought it was moonlight filtering its way through the trees. However, the angles didn't make sense. It didn't seem to be a bright light, and it wasn't moving. It was kind of like that glow you see over a bright city. We couldn't see the light source itself, though. Since there were no other access roads in the area, we decided it wasn't other campers. The hill was about a quarter mile from our campsite, so we decided to go investigate. Under normal circumstances, I know I wouldn't have done so. However, we all had a few rum and cokes in our stomachs, and 2 of us, Jacob and I, decide to take a look. My other friend, Isaac, decides to stay behind to pop some popcorn over the fire. We start walking towards the light source, and the situation gets even stranger. All the trees in the area have their bark knocked off in a circle around their trunks. We thought it could have been the work of a beaver that lived in the creek, but it seemed strange that a beaver would go around all these trees and just knock the bark off in a circle. Jacob and I start talking about the ghost beaver in pretty loud voices, probably due to our drunkenness. As we're almost to the top of the hill, Jacob tripped and yelled, "Oh crap!" A few seconds after he yelled, the light, whatever it was, went out. We look at each other, and decide that maybe we don't need to see what that light was after all. We walk back in silence, and keep looking back every few seconds. We decide to turn off our flashlight and just use the moonlight to get back to the campsite. When we get a couple of 100 feet from the campsite, I can see my other friend Isaac walking around the campsite. He was wearing a hooded coat that I hadn't seen him wearing before. For some reason, he's carrying his paintball gun around in his hand. That seemed a little odd, we said to each other. The fire had started to die down, so we couldn't see our campsite very well. At this point, we'd probably been gone for almost an hour. From the distance, it looked like Isaac was looking for something. He kept walking around the site and was peering in the tent. When we were almost back to the campsite, we saw Isaac walk up the road we came in on. We figured that he was going to go use the bathroom and didn't want to wander through the woods like us. When we got back, we sat next to the fire and waited for Isaac to come back. All of a sudden, we see him lurch out of the tent. He stumbles a few feet and vomits. After we left, he had a few more rum and cokes, he mumbles. We asked him why he kept wandering around the campsite with the paintball gun, and he gets a strange look on his face. They're locked up in the cab of the truck. Did you unlock it? We go and check the truck, enter the door code, and see all our paintball equipment just as we left it before. The keys to the truck were still hidden in a magnetic fob underneath. I get a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Isaac, what were you doing after we left? I ask. I was watching a movie on my phone, then I fell asleep, I guess. But you were walking around with your paintball gun, right? Did you just change jackets? Isaac said he had been in the tent since we left, and that he had been wearing the same unhood fleece all night. Someone had been walking around our campsite, and it wasn't Isaac. At this point, all of us are way too drunk to drive, but we decide to go ahead and pack up and go back to my house for the night. We don't bother packing up the tent, we just fold it down with the sleeping bags and everything in it. We jump in the F-150, and I start to drive out. When we get to the dirt hump, we see something gray blocking our path. The metal barrier that had been lying in the woods earlier is now back on its stand, right on top of the hump earlier. By this point, all of us have sobered up to the situation. No one wants to get out of the car to try to move the barrier. I had a metal guard on the front of the F-150, so I drive forward slowly, tapping the metal barrier with the front of my truck. It falls right off, and we drive over it slowly. We were terrified that it would pop one of the truck's tires as we drove over it, but it didn't. As we drive down the road, we see a vehicle following us with its lights off. It's probably 1,000 feet behind us, but we keep catching glimpses of it as the moon reflects light off it. I start to drive as fast as I can on the Forest Service road, and the other vehicle keeps pace. It doesn't get any closer though. It stays just 1 or 2 turns behind us. We can only see it when the road straightens out. After about 45 minutes of speeding along gravel roads, we make it back to the main paved road. I start to drive everyone back to my house, but I decide to go a different way just to be safe. I didn't get pulled over for a DUI, luckily. Camping can be fun, but very rural camping can be dangerous. I've driven past that metal barrier since that time, but it's always been in place. I would never go down that road again though.